Liar. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Well, all right. Hello, here I am. How are you doing, everybody? Good morning. It is Tuesday, May 24th, 2022. Time for another show. Time to retweet Bill in Portland, Maine, waking us up with his morning tweet regarding the show. The Kagro in the Morning radio show is live now. That's the way it starts. I'm going to agree with that. So far so good, yes? Okay, due to your shenanigans on Victoria Day, not mine, yours. Not me, but you. I'm just thinking Donald Trump in that sense. Okay, KagroX is revoking all your non-fungible tokens. Ha! That would have gotten you free games of non-fungible Space Invaders at any arcade, or any non-fungible arcade anyway, in Saskatchewan. And they're all non-fungible, aren't they? Okay. Yeah, the non-fungible token market appears to have collapsed. I mean, it did a while ago. In online time, it was like 100 years ago, I guess. But I'm still marveling at that whole thing. And there are still people, I think, who retained their, what were they, like hexagonal or octagonal Twitter avatars. If your avatar was a non-fungible token, I guess you could indicate that you had spent money on the thing, and too much at that. I mean, any money being spent on a picture like that is probably too much. But yeah, people still use them. I think a few people, but everyone got rid of them. Most people got rid of them in embarrassment as soon as it became known that was a thing. And then when non-fungible tokens collapsed, I guess everybody ran away with them. Okay, so that's terrific. Why not? If you wasted your money, fess up to it, and well, we'll put you in the queue for a story to read about today. All right, Tuesday, lots of things to round up. It is primary day again across the South. I know that because I saw somebody on Twitter say it was happening across the South. I know it's happening in Georgia, and then beyond that, I don't know. Well, the rest of the South, I guess. Whatever. I don't know. I'm not certain where it's happening, where it's not. I mean, I know what constitutes the South. Maybe they're also having primaries. Maybe they're not. I don't know. We could read articles and become informed. That might work. But Georgia is the one that everyone has had their eye on. And so that's the one I'm aware of. But maybe somehow rings a bell that maybe Mo Brooks is dealing with his primary in Alabama. Is that right? I don't know. Might be right, might be wrong. Well, it won't matter until tomorrow anyway, when the results are in and we're able to report that. And then Greg and I will take a tour of the states that held their primaries today. I'm not doing anybody any favors by alerting them to the fact that they need to go out to vote unless you're like, I'm a Southern Democrat. I guess I better find out whether or not I have a primary to deal with. Okay, well, let's see. Many things we can catch up on today. Speaking of, I guess, the primaries that are going on, is this happening? Is this impacting the primary? Everybody is talking this morning about what's going on in Michigan, which is to say there are shenanigans going on in Michigan. And I saw a couple stories, thought about which ones we wanted to go with. Well, let's go with the one that Kate Sherrill has sent to us. It's coming through the filter of Talking Points memo, so we'll see what kind of work they did in preparing the story for our consumption today. Leading GOP, I'm going to start doing this as painful as it is. Leading GOP candidates for Michigan Gov, G-U-V, they go with the slick lingo here, could be disqualified over wave of fraudulent signatures. Yes, that's right, and before you get too crazy about it, I saw, well, let's see, should I call up the Twitter timeline on these things? I saw the reporter Simon Schuster, which is funny to me because wasn't that is that still not a publishing house out there that, or I guess it's Simon and Schuster, and he's Simon D. Schuster, I think was his middle name, and I thought it would be funny if he changed his middle name to something with an N so that he would be Simon Schuster, but he's probably tired of that joke. Anyway, he's been tweeting about it because he is in Michigan, and let's see, what's the story with the way he was reporting it was, lots of detail on it, but reminding everybody that what was happening was fraudulent signatures on nominating petitions to get yourself on the ballot, which he, I guess, semi-helpfully reminds everybody is not actual voter fraud. And he's complaining about that. A fair number of folks on Twitter are referring to last night's news as Republican voter fraud. That's at best a mischaracterization. At worst, it's misinformation. I'm not very concerned about it, but I wanted to let you know that somebody else is concerned about it. They want to get the story right, and I guess technically it's not voter fraud because they're not voting at this point. But it is fraud that has to do with attempting to use the fake profiles of voters to get someone else on the ballot. Call it whatever you want, I guess. Certainly there would be no hesitation among Republicans were the shoe on the other foot. Anyway, describing the problem is Matt Schuem over at TPM, describing it this way. Oh dear, and this is my 8th of 9 free articles this month. It's time to become a member of Talking Points Memo, and it's not a bad investment if you're thinking of doing that. I'd recommend it. It's just if you can get away with it, maybe you don't. And I could spread things around among other sources. And it is May 24th. Pretty soon I'll have new free articles. They're pretty strict too. I've read articles. I don't know exactly what mechanism they use, but they don't sort of say, well, this IP address has read this article already. So if I read it on my phone in one part of the house, and then I say, okay, let me open it up on my laptop and put it in Pocket for tomorrow. Reading it, it clicks up as another story that I've read. So I don't feel so bad. I mean, they want to afford me 9 stories, but then I only get 4 because if I open them twice, it counts against me both times. Anyway, one day I'll have plenty of money and I'll pay them for it. Here's the story. Might as well. It's a freebie. A signature forgery scandal. They don't call it voter fraud. A signature forgery scandal has turned the race for the GOP nomination to be Michigan's next governor on its head. Its very head, I tell you. 2 leading Republican candidates did not collect enough signatures to qualify for the primary ballot after invalid signatures were excluded, according to a report from the state's Bureau of Elections. And as I have seen it told on Twitter this morning, that there were, I don't know how many major candidates there were, but apparently there were allegedly 10 Republicans vying for ballot space in this primary, and fully 5 of them were disqualified from this, including one of the front runners. So, not just, joke candidates or vanity candidates getting excluded in this. They're all joke candidates and vanity candidates for that matter. Okay, the Bureau of Elections reports will go now to the Board of State Canvassers, which will vote Thursday, later on this week, on which candidates qualify to appear on the ballot for the state's August 2nd primaries. 36 petition circulators, that'd be campaign workers who are hired to collect the signatures. Maybe you've run into them outside of your local supermarket or something like that. They submitted fraudulent petition sheets consisting entirely of invalid signatures, entirely. So, I don't know, you get paid something close to minimum wage, you go and you stand outside of the local supermarket and ask people to sign to get these candidates on the ballot, and usually around here anyway, I'm sure same wherever you are, maybe if they don't bother giving you a pitch, but occasionally one of them will be conscientious enough to give a pitch and say, you don't have to vote for them, it's just an exercise in democracy. If you will lend us your signature, we'll have a chance to put their name on the ballot and give the voters a choice. And sometimes that will even talk people who don't even necessarily support that candidate's party into signing the thing and putting them on the ballot. But sometimes not, and it becomes frustrating. Or sometimes rather than go out and work for your pay, someone will sit at home and take out a phone book or a voter list or something like that and just fake the whole thing up, which the rate of pay is not all that great to start with, and then filling out all the ballot or all the signature sheets is no small task. Anyway, this is what these guys did, I guess, just faked the whole thing. 36 petition circulators submitted fraudulent petition sheets consisting entirely of invalid signatures, according to the Bureau. In all, according to the Bureau's report on Monday, these circulators submitted at least 68,000 invalid signatures across nominating petitions for 10 candidates. Both leading Republican candidates submitted well above the 15,000 signatures necessary, but were subsequently hit with complaints that counts contained fraudulent signatures. James Craig, the former Detroit police chief, submitted more than 11,100 invalid signatures and just under 10,200 valid ones, according to the Bureau's report. Bureau staff noted consistent handwriting for the entirety of a petition sheet, including the signatures, and evidence of round tabling, or the practice of passing a petition sheet around in a group to make entries appear more authentic. So you have to coordinate all of your fraud with one another. Another candidate, Perry Johnson, submitted nearly 14,000 valid signatures, but not enough to make the ballot, 1,000 short, plus 9,000 invalid signatures. The same group of petition circulators who submitted thousands of invalid signature pages for Craig's campaign did so for Johnson's, the Bureau reported. A report noted incorrect addresses and misspelled names. 3 additional Republican gubernatorial candidates also fell short of the valid signatures needed to qualify, the Bureau said. Michael Brown, Michael Markey, and Donna Brandenburg each submitted well over the 15,000 signatures required, but in all 3 cases, more than 10,000 of their 15,000 were deemed invalid. Candidates need, of course, 15,000 valid signatures to qualify for the gubernatorial primary ballot, and were allowed to submit up to 30,000 for review. Gubernatorial candidates also need at least 100 signatures from from at least half of the state's congressional districts. Some states require, X number from every congressional district, whatever it is. Prices for signature gatherers spiked this cycle. I guess that explains the race for the fraudulent money, increasing pressure on campaigns as they raced to meet the qualifying figure. The ultimate decision on the candidate's qualification for office is up to the Michigan Board of State Canvassers, which is made up of 2 Democrats and 2 Republicans, and is set to meet on Thursday. That usually works out great. I don't know what deadlock does in a situation like this. If the Board of State Canvassers heeds the Bureau of Elections report and disqualifies 5 out of the 10 Republican gubernatorial contenders, that could open the door for Tudor Dixon. That's Tudor, not Tooter, which is probably accurate too. Hey, Tudor, come on over here. But that then actually happens in his house. But Tudor, like the English monarchs, Dixon. Who is that? I don't know. But he denied, and still does, I guess, that Joe Biden won Michigan in the 2020 election. And on Monday, received the endorsement of the wealthy DeVos family, Michigan's most influential political kingmakers. Dixon, notably, is also the only candidate to receive a shout-out, I'm shouting out at you, at Donald Trump's rally in Michigan last month. The former president called her fantastic and brilliant, or rather, fantastic and brilliant. And, okay, I didn't guess the gender correctly based on Tudor Dixon, but Tudor, TD, for short, as they call her when they don't remember her name, is I don't know what, a protege, a DeVos protege, and Trumpy enough, or maybe good-looking enough, perhaps, to get a shout-out from Donald Trump. At least one campaign vowed to fight for their qualification on Monday night. The staff of the Democrat Secretary of... This is interesting. This is what the quote says. I don't know if they're misquoted or they're just stupid and said the wrong words, but the quote says, The staff of the Democrat Secretary of Staff does not have the right to unilaterally void every single signature obtained by the alleged forgers who victimized 5 campaigns, John Yob, a consultant for Johnson, wrote on Twitter, adding, "We strongly believe they are refusing to count thousands of signatures from legitimate voters who signed the petitions and look forward to winning this fight before the board and, if necessary, in the courts." Well, I doubt that you'll be able to do that, but reminder, one, of course, I think they're trying to refer to the Secretary of State, not the Secretary of Staff. And two, as the article explained a few moments ago, it's up to the State Board of Canvassers. Is that right? Or was it the Board of State Canvassers, or canvas people, cutouts from Kansas, canvas, or Kansas, for that matter. I was told it could be Canvas or Kansas, whichever you want. He told me, call this whatever you like. But at any rate, it's not the Secretary of State, but I don't know, maybe they're part of the Secretary of State's office. The Board of State Canvassers. That's right. I knew it was kind of backwards. I would have guessed that it's the State Board of Canvassers, but it's not. It's the Board of State Canvassers. And they get to decide, and I guess you can fight them in court, and I don't know on what grounds you would do it, but if you notice, the rest of the statement from the is it an attorney? A consultant from John Yob here is it's good snake oil. Like, he really dodges it just right so that you could still say, oh no, I was still telling the truth. Well, one, of course, you could say, oh no, I didn't say that we were going to beat the Board of State Canvassers. I said we were going to beat the Democrat Secretary of Staff, and we're undefeated against the Secretary of Staff, I guess. But how about this one? I liked that we strongly believe that they are refusing to count thousands of signatures from legitimate voters who signed the petitions. Well, I mean, they are in this sense. You have to get 15,000 signatures. Only 8,000, let's say, of yours are valid. And then you'll say, but you're refusing to count thousands of valid signatures. Well, no, I've counted them. There's 8,000 of them. It's just that it's not 15,000. Yeah, but you're saying they don't count. Well, they don't, because there's only 8,000 of them. If you gather 14,999 legitimate signatures, technically, I mean, the Board of State Canvassers might say, one signature short. Go ahead. We'll put you on the ballot. I don't know. Maybe, or they might just hold the line. I don't know what kind of sticklers they are for that sort of thing, but I don't know what else they do. So maybe why not be a stickler? But it's not that we're not counting them. We've counted them. There's 14,999 of them. It's just that none of them count because you didn't reach 15,000. So your petition is nice. It's decorative. It shows good penmanship, but you don't get on the ballot with it. So in that sense, it doesn't count. So you see it's interesting, right? The consultant can say they're not counting the signatures of the valid signatures of registered voters. This is disenfranchisement, outrageous. Sort of, but not really. But I guess, if we're gonna read this story in a world where we say that this isn't Republican voter fraud, then you can't. The same world says, if there's consistency, but we're dealing with gimmitarians, that you can't say we're not counting them. We counted them. It's just that they won't count for something else. Anyway, that appeared to be a response to the Bureau's statement that due to the quote, unprecedented scale of the invalid signature issue this year, staff did not review every petition sheet individually. Oh, so maybe there were some they didn't count. Rather, they isolated those sheets submitted by petition circulators whose work they determined was fraudulent, and conducted a targeted signature check to confirm that circulators' submissions were in fact full of fraudulent entries. And I guess if you need to have 15,000 to get on the ballot, and you submit 20,000, and we find 5,001 of them to be invalid, then you don't really have to count how many signatures are on the rest of the sheets. You fail. There's no way you can get to 15,000. So even if you don't actually count them, it doesn't really matter since they won't count, right? To once again use the word count in both senses here. At this point, the Bureau does not have reason to believe that any specific candidates or campaigns were aware of the activities of fraudulent petition circulators. And that's nice. I mean, okay, so you didn't do anything wrong, but that doesn't mean you get on the ballot. We'll see what the board does with them. The findings announced Monday come after several complaints were lodged against Republican gubernatorial contenders. According to a Democratic Party-backed complaint filed by Mark Brewer, alleged in April, Craig's campaign submitted nearly 7,000 forged signatures as part of his 21,000 signature total. More than 2,000 more, it says. More than 2,000 had other issues, including 30 allegedly signed in the names of deceased voters, according to the same complaint. Craig's campaign acknowledged earlier this month that his campaign may have submitted invalid signatures. The allegation that a handful of circulators defrauded the Craig campaign and Michigan voters is troubling, but the proof will ultimately be found in a careful comparison between petition and qualified voter file or master card signatures. An attorney representing the campaign, Edward Greem, told the Detroit Free Press. Greem did not immediately respond to TPM's request for comment. I've been practicing election law in this state since the 80s, and I've never seen forgery on this scale. Brewer, the former longtime leader of the state's Democratic Party, told TPM Monday he returned to comment to TPM before the findings of the investigation were announced. Another Democratic Party-backed complaint alleged that, among other issues, Johnson's campaign had submitted at least 66 signatures in the name of dead voters. The campaign appeared to have hired several of the same signature gatherers that submitted allegedly fraudulent petitions for the Craig campaign, the complaint noted. In fact, names of a small handful of signature gatherers appeared on challenged petition sheets submitted across several different campaigns, but it's not clear at this point whether a single firm is behind the alleged forgeries, whether a group of freelance circulators was hired by several campaigns, or some other explanation. There's no question that these forgers were making a pretty good living working on several different campaigns, doing the same thing over and over again, Brewer said. The findings announced Monday don't automatically disqualify candidates. That decision is up to the 4-member board of state canvassers. That's the same body that was subject to then-President Donald Trump's pressure campaign in 2020 when he attempted to convince the board's Republicans not to affirm Joe Biden's victory. A candidate may think they're qualified for the ballot. The question is, are there 3 members of the Board of Canvassers that agree with them or not? Says Stephen Liedel, or perhaps Liedel, Liedel, the attorney who submitted the complaint against Johnson. All indications are it's going to be a long meeting Thursday. One Republican board member, Norman Schinkel, abstained from the vote to certify Trump's victory in 2020. The other Republican, Aaron Van Langeveld, voted to certify Biden's win. Interesting. How they put that. One Republican board member abstained from the vote to certify Trump's victory. Trump didn't have a victory in 2020, so I'm not really sure what that meant. The other Republican voted to certify Biden's win, which was correct, and he was subsequently not renominated to the board by the Republican Party. He was replaced with Tony Daunt. Daunt told Bridge, Michigan earlier this month that whether I agree with the candidate, whether I'll disagree with the candidate, if they haven't met the requirements of the law, then they're not fit to run for office or have ballot access. That sounds pretty good. See if he stands up and backs that up with deeds. Schinkel said then, referring to the circulators accused of forgeries, I just hope they go to prison so they learn a lesson. But I might validate their signatures anyway. Read, if you will, the entire Bureau of Elections report below here at TPM, which through the magic of Scribd you have the chance to do. It is a good 17 pages long, so I'm going to bet you won't. I certainly won't. I think we got more than enough flavor for what's going on there. More than enough, in fact, to fill the entire first segment, as it turns out. All right. Well, let's see. Where are we here with other things we wanted to catch up on? There are a few things to bring to your attention. Oh, well, this one needs a little bit more time. But, well, anyway, good news from Michigan. That should be fun. And the fact that some of the leading Republican candidates got caught up in this is fun all by itself. And you will remember, of course, in addition to Trump pressuring the Board of State Canvassers in Michigan, you'll remember that when he was putting pressure on Brad Raffensperger down in Georgia, caught up in his own primary today and tonight, versus Jody Heiss, right? Looking to unseat him. When Trump was pressuring them, he was very frequently screaming about matching signatures with all these mail-in ballots. Are you looking at the signatures? You should look at the signatures. If they're fraudulent signatures, you got to throw out the ballots. And of course, what do you know? Republicans get caught up in signature fraud in Michigan and I'm sure elsewhere. These kind of stories crop up every once in a while, state to state, and you can imagine why. I mean, it seems like a very tedious task. Every single one of these 10 candidates hand you 15,000 signatures. And the truth is, since people hire signature gatherers to do the work, sometimes they stand there with, 3, 4, 5 petitions for different candidates and just say, if I could trouble you outside the grocery store here, sign each one of these 5, that would be a big help. And then, but 15,000 for 10 candidates, 150,000 signatures, you're really going to check them all individually? Probably not. So, easy fraud to do, but I guess they're paying better than they used to. Maybe thanks to COVID. Who knows? Hi, it's me, David Waldman, the same guy who was just talking to you a second ago. Our Patreon subscription drive is still going strong, with over 175 monthly donors who help keep us on the air. If we've helped keep you going during the pandemic, why not return the favor and help us keep going so we can all be together for the next disaster? Patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it easy to make secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. Maybe you'd like to thank us for keeping you sane during the Trump era. Maybe you're looking forward to in-depth explanations of what's going on in the Biden administration. Whatever it is that keeps you listening, we need your help to keep bringing it to you. And hey, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running with those options too. Thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We literally could not do this without you. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Important story coming across the wire. Actually, I'm curious to see if I can understand it. I'm not certain exactly from what angle they are approaching things here, but alert! According to The Hill, because they always catch my eye with photos, Walmart pulling Juneteenth ice cream after social media backlash. And I'm not certain what kind of backlash it is that we're talking about here, and I'm curious, is it people screaming that you have to stop selling this because it's CRT ice cream, or is it something else? And I'm still not sure. I tried to skim the article to find out during the 2-minute break, and gosh, that just wasn't enough. Let's see what Rachel Scully from The Hill has to say about this, see if she can clear it up for us. Walmart is recalling, like maybe is it got salmonella in it? Is that the issue? Walmart is recalling its ice cream commemorating Juneteenth after it received heavy backlash on social media, with many critics calling out the company for using the holiday as a marketing scheme. Okay. All right. That's the criticism. And it has nothing to do with contamination. I guess, I mean, did seem odd, like Juneteenth ice cream. I don't really get the connection, but why not? I guess. But yeah, on the other hand, why? Just in terms of, I guess, I don't know. I think maybe they're. Let's read on before I jump to any conclusions. Share and celebrate African American culture, emancipation, and enduring hope. The packaging on the swirled red velvet and cheesecake flavored ice cream reads. I don't love the flavor, but that's neither here nor there. Juneteenth holiday marks a celebration of freedom and independence, except they'd say it correctly, freedom and independence. Walmart said in a statement on Fox television stations, 2 Fox television stations. However, we received feedback that a few items caused concern for some of our customers, and we sincerely apologize. We are reviewing our assortment and will remove items as appropriate. That doesn't clear anything up. Why they gave the statement to Fox, I don't know. Why Fox covered the story, I don't know. Let's see. There's more, though. Users on social media are instead directing Walmart customers to buy Creamalicious ice cream, as it is, and now I understand the protest here, as it is black-owned, a black-owned brand on sale in stores and features a red velvet cheesecake flavor. I don't know if there's any significance to red velvet cheesecake flavor, but, I mean, I guess that's a good alternative if you're dying for red velvet cheesecake flavor and you don't want to buy Walmart's one, because I guess the idea is, why give money to a family of rich white people for Juneteenth ice cream if you can get the same flavor, if there's any significance at all to the flavor, as opposed to, like, it's Juneteenth, I'd like to celebrate, I want an ice cream and flavor that I like. But, you know, nothing against Creamalicious. I'm sure they have other flavors if you don't like red velvet cheesecake. And also, it probably tastes pretty good because, you know, nobody's going to make ice cream and then taste it and go, oh, God, this is horrific. Sell it. You know, well, not nobody, but, you know, not these guys, I'm sure. Anyway, The Hill has reached out to Walmart for comment, and it sounds like the comment was given to Fox instead, so I don't know why. Juneteenth, in case you've forgotten, celebrated on June 19th, is the day in 1865 when the remaining enslaved people in Galveston, Texas, were finally informed of their freedom by the, purportedly anyway, I guess now you get to be free, thanks to the Emancipation Proclamation. Last June, President Biden signed a bill making Juneteenth a federal holiday, which allows most federal employees to take the day off in observance. That's the end. They've closed comments on this, too. I wonder what kind of comments they were getting. So, all right. I was just curious whether it was white backlash against CRT ice cream or whether it was black-driven backlash, or who knows, maybe well-meaning white people's backlash, well, who knows, about buying your Juneteenth ice cream from white people. I had never considered Juneteenth ice cream before, but I'm not that, you know, I'm a white-ish person, not attuned to the Juneteenth celebration. If anybody has any idea about whether red velvet cheesecake flavor means anything, or just you gotta choose a we're gonna have a Juneteenth ice cream, which doesn't make any particular sense at all by itself, unless somebody has an explanation for that. Then you got to pick a flavor. And, like, I guess I would suggest vanilla is not a good one. If you're picking out of a hat, which you're not. So, I don't know. And, I mean, I guess, is chocolate too obvious? So you go with, what else have we got? Red velvet cheesecake. Who could complain about that? Well, okay, I mean, you could come up with somebody, but don't. And, I don't know. I mean, it's really an argument not to have a Juneteenth ice cream. But again, you know, June 19th, it's kind of warm out usually. Celebration, ice cream. Maybe there's even a tradition that goes along with it. I got no idea. If anybody knows, please let me know. And, or if anybody can make something up that sounds convincing, now's your chance to prank the show. Okay, a reminder, by the way, from left-leaning cock. Everybody gets to say that because it's a chicken. Remember, says LLC. Oh, that's good. It's did you know you were a limited liability corporation as well? Remember, if the voter fraud doesn't originate from the Champaign region of Michigan, it's just sparkling ballot malfeasance. So you have to keep that in mind when you're dealing with Michigan and being admonished by Simon Schuster that it's not voter fraud. Okay, let's see. Other stories I need to share with you. First of all, I got to get local with you because that's where I am. As you know, I like to bring you the news from Loudoun County, Virginia here. Oh, Scott's done some production work here. Yeah, thank you. And he's texted me some answers. I guess it's going to explain. There we are. The story behind red-hued Juneteenth food and drink. I knew there had to be something because the idea that, well, I don't know. I guess they could have come around to it by accident. Not the red-hued thing, but if for whatever reason Walmart just chose red velvet cream, whatever it was, cheesecake flavored ice cream, and got in trouble for it, and they were looking for a black-owned substitute, and then somebody thought, well, it should be the same flavor so that at least, I don't know. Then it's just the comparison between black ownership and white ownership, as opposed to, well, I love the black-owned ice cream, but not that flavor. It's not about that. Thanks to Atlas Obscura, Scott sends me. I'll get back to Loudoun County in just a minute. We have this story, the story, as a matter of fact, behind red-hued Juneteenth food and drink. Do I have to put this in the roundup, Scott, or you already have the link? For my own sanity, I think I might have to book it and put it in the roundup. Otherwise, I don't know. I'll panic. Red Fair at June 19th celebrations has significance that predates American slavery. Wow, so an older notion here. Christina Ayele Diossa is my best guess at the pronunciation of D-J-O-S-S-A, Diossa. Or maybe we'll give a little Y sound to it. This from June 19th of 2018. Let's roll on this one. Let's see. Oh, and there's a picture of some red velvet cake, and the caption reads that red velvet cake adds to the repertoire of red desserts made for Juneteenth festivities. And I guess there's no other red ice cream to choose from, really. I mean, whatever. Okay. On June 19th, black Americans gather across the United States to feast, as they have done every year since the nation's enslaved people were freed. Okay. The celebrations at public parks have historically included parades, the reading of President Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation, and the main event, the food. Prior to the celebrations in 1933, the Dallas Morning News reported that watermelon, barbecue, and red lemonade will be consumed in quantity. Indeed, laid across their plates were charcoal grilled meats, greens, black-eyed peas, and tea cakes, but also an assortment of foods and drinks with red hues. Red velvet cake, red strawberry soda, and red punch always made appearances. For a long time, relatives told young ones that the red symbolized the blood of the millions of enslaved people who had suffered and died. That's plausible. But the red foods and drinks may have had a longer history that began on the continent where it says where these people, but okay, I think we get to let it go for now, were taken from. That'd be Africa. But I think everybody knows that. Juneteenth celebrations originated in Texas. On June 19, 1865, Union General Gordon Granger issued an order declaring, "The people of Texas are informed that in accordance with the proclamation from the Executive of the United States, all slaves are free." This was 2.5 years after President Lincoln decreed the Emancipation Proclamation, which declared enslaved people in the rebel states were free, but was only practical to those close to Union territory. For a long time, formerly enslaved people in Texas did not know they were free, and even after they knew, they faced lynchings, rape, and other continued acts of forced labor. That didn't stop freed people from celebrating the June 19th announcement in opposition to the systems of white oppression. The holiday became known initially as Manumission Day, named after the act of an owner freeing their captives, which isn't what was happening here. But later, the month of June and the number 19 became mixed into what's known as Juneteenth. Now, back to the red foods thing. Red foods and drinks were a major way of commemorating that legacy of enslavement and the holiday. But the practice of eating red foods, red cake, barbecue, punch, and fruit may owe its existence to the enslaved Yoruba and Congo brought to Texas in the 19th century from present-day Nigeria, Ghana, Togo, Benin, and the Democratic Republic of Congo, writes culinary historian and food writer Michael Twitty in his blog Afro Culinaria. Hope I pronounced that correctly. Twitty goes on to write, enslavement narratives from Texas recall an African ancestor being lured using red flannel cloth, and many of the charms and power objects used to manipulate invisible forces required a red handkerchief. Professor of History and Foodways at Babson College, Fred Opie, writes that some historians believe the red color could be connected to the Asante and Yoruba's special occasions, which included offering up the blood of animals, especially the red blood of white birds and white goats, to their ancestors and gods. So, well, the connection is to blood in either way. Okay, red in many West African cultures is a symbol of strength, spirituality, and life and death. It's possible this cultural legacy, along with these groups' distinct food knowledge of okra, beans, melons, and many other food groupings, some red, some not, was brought across the Atlantic. The story is clearer when it comes to drinks. All right, so there's more. According to culinary historian Adrian Miller, red drinks at Juneteenth celebrations have links to the fruits of two native West African plants, the kola nut and the hibiscus. The kola nut, typically white or red, was and still is served to guests as a snack to chew, used as a water purifier or as steeped for tea. The flowers of the hibiscus, too, were often stewed to make reddish-purple tea called bissap and provided to guests. Both were extracted to the Caribbean and the Americas during the Atlantic slave trade. From watching their captives, plantation owners noticed that the kola nut could be used as an energy booster, digestive or cold remedy, and made for a stimulating additive to bitter water. When crushed into a powder, then added into water, the kola nut creates a reddish-brown, refreshing drink. Miller also notes that enslaved people used red corn after a long day of corn shucking to make their own whiskey. This practice of adding reddish substances to make sweet, palatable drinks was common, so it wasn't out of the ordinary to see such drinks associated with Juneteenth. All right, there's a bit more here, but I don't know how much more culinary history we need to know about these things, but at least we know that there is an explanation. I don't want to give it short shrift. It's only a paragraph or two more. Why not share it? Even after enslavement, the usages started to evolve in different ways in black households, especially in the South. It was common to see homemade teas and lemonades infused with red fruits such as cherries or strawberries. Some drinks were made by taking a red-colored fruit and adding vinegar to preserve it, and then families would add the syrup to water and sweeten it. During the Southern cooking era, molasses and water and red lemonade were inexpensive, refreshing drinks that could be made easily and quickly. Their popularity reflected the poor economic conditions of African Americans in the rural South, wrote Miller in his book, Soul Food, The Surprising Story of an American Cuisine One Plate at a Time. Food coloring came into preeminence in the late 1800s, and by the 1920s, red-colored carbonated drinks like the Texas-made soda Big Red became part of the Juneteenth culinary tradition. Whatever the origin of each item on the Juneteenth table, collectively they hold a lot of symbolic meaning. I love eating red-colored foods, especially red drinks, because it connects me to previous generations of African Americans, said Miller. I think about all those emancipation celebrations, church suppers, family reunions, and other occasions where people got together to celebrate, renew family ties and friendships, and affirm their humanity. So excellent. Good find to Scott. Sorry that wasn't available offhand from my own knowledge base, but now we can add it. And now we have an answer on the red velvet cheesecake flavored ice cream. Don't buy it at Walmart. Well, you can't. They're going to take it off the market anyway. And you can buy it from Creamalicious instead, on sale, I'm sure, at a retailer near you. I haven't checked the contents of the ice cream freezer that closely at the grocery store of late. And red velvet, not a favorite flavor of mine, but okay. At any rate, that's neither here nor there. Now we have an explanation for the backlash and the reason why the flavor was what it was. You learn something new every day on this show, unless you already knew that, in which case you're bored, and it's time to move on to the local stories I was promising you. First, of course, I checked in with the coronavirus report that comes in email each day from the New York Times. Another slight uptick in the numbers here in Loudoun County. Of course, we're just over the 200 mark. In average daily cases just ticked up a little bit, so it's at 206. Just wanted to let you know that it was still on the way up, and I did see some discussion on Twitter yesterday of some concern that the New York area might want to return to indoor masking mandates at some time in the near future. We'll see whether that pans out. But the bigger story locally, growing out of stories we shared a few months ago, and the great conflation of panics about fake CRT, sensitivity and inclusion training in general, mask wearing in the schools. Oh, I don't remember. There's probably like 5 or 6 other things that they conflated into the big screaming matches at the school boards here in Loudoun County and elsewhere around the country, but making headlines here in D.C. In Loudoun because of its proximity to the D.C. area, and of course, the presence in Loudoun County of national Republican operatives who make their homes here, and so were able to bring their PR skills to bear in this local campaign and make it appear to be more important and more widely supported than it really was. And then, of course, its repercussions in the gubernatorial race, much made of the ability of the Youngkin campaign to campaign specifically against what's happening here in Loudoun County, and to ride that to victory statewide, even though he lost Loudoun County by some 10 plus points. But it made a national splash. And of course, I took pains to remind everybody that Loudoun pretty soundly rejected Youngkin and his campaign, despite what the style of reporting in the news might otherwise lead you to believe. We also had, of course, the localized issue of the high school student accused and later convicted, a juvenile student later convicted of 2 sexual assaults in 2 different Loudoun County schools, and the allegations at first, and then the insistence that it was simply fact by the newly elected governor and the newly elected attorney general as well, that there had been a cover-up by the Loudoun County school system and the school board and the superintendent, and that they were going to get to the bottom of it, and they were going to get rid of these people. As part and parcel of all this, the attorney general has purportedly convened a special grand jury to investigate how the school system handled these reports and how they handled the policy on how to deal with the perpetrator. And in addition, there was launched a recall effort to kick out members of the school board whom the activists on the Republican side thought had perhaps been particularly egregious in their handling of the situation. And, well, the update is this. It's now made it before a judge who actually has supposedly some obligation to be fair and impartial and actually look at the legal standing of what these Republicans are trying to do. And this judge says, nope, BS, you're out of here. And the recall movement has been squashed. According to the reporting in the Loudoun Times-Mirror, in Loudoun County, a judge dismisses the school board recall cases. Nathaniel Klein reporting this for the Loudoun Times. A judge assigned to preside over a pair of recall petitions against 2 cases, cases surrounding the recall petitions against 2 cases against Loudoun County School Board members, found them to be insufficient on Monday and dismissed the cases in a packed circuit courtroom in Leesburg on Monday. Judge H. Thomas Padrick Jr., Padrick, who was appointed by the Virginia Supreme Court to hear the recall cases in less than an hour, heard motions and arguments by several groups of attorneys, including those representing the respondents in the case, school board members Brenda Sheridan from the Sterling District and Atusa Reeser of the Algonquian District. Familiar to me, of course, as my own representative from this district on the school board, and someone well known to me because she's got a son in the same Boy Scout troop, and we occasionally see one another at back when we used to have gatherings and parties of sorts in the neighborhood, and people would have New Year's Eve parties, etc. We saw the Reesers there all the time. And so, yeah, this one had some personal meaning, and of course figures that they target her in all of this. And here she was, this way I get the full story, and I get occasionally personal explanations of, I was just trying to make sure that the kids had good schools. And then all of a sudden this happens. And then all of a sudden they're pretending that I have been plotting against America this whole time. Like, all I wanted to do was make sure the schools were good and we weren't wasting any money. Jeez. Anyway, the judge said he was reluctant to make the decision considering the work by the petitioners, but said the claims in the petitions, specifically regarding the decision to transfer the teen student who assaulted another one to another high school, did not necessarily involve the school board, and that everything goes through the superintendent and administration. So they were just, talking out of their hat when they were, we'll recall the members of the school board who supported this decision, because it's their fault that it happened this way. And it isn't. It's just not up to them. City of Charlottesville Commonwealth's Attorney Joseph Platania, who was appointed by Judge Padrick, was expected to serve as counsel for the petitioners in the Reeser case after Loudoun County Commonwealth's Attorney Buddha Bibaraj, a Democrat, advised the court during a telephone conference that she would be recusing herself from the Reeser case, according to an April 19th court order. Ultimately, Platania was appointed to serve in both cases after Padrick dismissed Bibaraj from the cases on Monday, so it would be fair for all. Bibaraj had been, I think, elected as a Democrat on the same ballot when we voted here in Loudoun County as Atusa Reeser, who I guess the school board is technically nonpartisan, but nominally, I think, fair to say, a Democrat. And for the sake of fairness, the Commonwealth's attorney here in the county said, well, perhaps it shouldn't be me handling the case. Fight for Schools, a political action group which organized the recall efforts, sought to join the case along with the NAACP Loudoun branch. Padrick denied their requests to join the case. On Friday, Platania filed a motion stating that the respondents' motion to quash, where are we here? The motion to quash rule to show cause. Boy, that's more complicated than I thought. On Friday, Platania filed a motion stating that the respondents' motion to quash rule to show cause and dismiss the petition against Reeser is well-founded and should be granted. Dawn Boyce, representing both school board members, filed the motion stating that the petitioners are insufficient. Platania later stated in court his conclusion should also be for Sheridan, as the court determined that both petitions and the facts are similar. Even if the court were to find a reasonable factual basis in the petition to establish a neglect of duty, misuse of office, or incompetence in the performance of duties, the Commonwealth is unable to locate evidence in the petition that such conduct had a material adverse effect upon the conduct of the office, Platania wrote in his motion. Unfortunately, the writer here not doing much to untangle the legalese for us. A factual basis of material adverse effect is essential, he wrote. Merely stating it exists does not make it so. Nearly 2 months ago, judges from the 20th Circuit Court asked the state Supreme Court to appoint a judge after all 5 judges, including Jeanette Irby, who briefly presided over a pair of ongoing recall cases, recused themselves from the board members' cases. Petitioners from the Sterling and Algonquian districts were seeking the removal of both school board members. Fight for Schools organized the recall efforts after expressing opposition to some of the current board's conduct with the public and decisions over instruction. However, Reeser described the action as a waste of taxpayer resources to undermine people's votes and the will of voters by removing elected school board members. I'm so grateful that today the independent Commonwealth's attorney found that the petition lacks any reasonable factual basis, Reeser says. And if you're going to lack something, reasonable factual basis isn't really what you want that to be if you're headed to court. She later said, "What I can tell you is this type of malicious court filing has a chilling effect on democracy," which is, of course, why Republicans are doing it. It encourages, or rather discourages, good people from stepping up to serve their community. If an angry group can abuse the courts for their own political agenda, it will end democracy as we know it, she said. I will keep fighting to make sure this does not happen again, and I will keep working to put the best interests of our kids first. There's a bit more. Let's read a little bit more as we exit over the music here. In January, Irby was expected to decide whether to allow Fight for Schools to join the case and whether to disqualify Beberage from being involved in the cases. But shortly before her decision was expected to be made public, the NAACP Loudoun branch announced it too was seeking to join the recall cases. Irby later recused herself from the cases on February 1st, according to court records. The court records did not include an explanation for her recusal after hearing arguments last month. All right, we'll take our 1-minute break, and we may be done with this story. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I do have one more thing to add. We'll skip down to the bottom of the piece here to let you know. I mean, it was confusing. It's a confusing procedural posture for the case. But basically, you know, the news is that action on one of several fronts here has finally come to an end. No word yet on whether there would be any appeal from this, from the leadership of so-called Fight for Schools. Apparently, I believe I recall from the older stories that this is a national Republican operative who happens to live here in the district, Ian Pryor, who has taken the helm of this Fight for Schools group. So no word from him yet. You know, he's holding the door open to appealing this case. But they have another avenue running. As I mentioned, there's been a special grand jury impaneled by the Attorney General to investigate the policymaking and decision-making regarding how the students' cases were handled in the sexual assault cases. And this was an outgrowth of that. This simply a matter of Republican voters riling up angry parents and pretending that they could do something that they could not. Now, as it turns out, they may not be able to do the other thing either. The special grand jury that's been impaneled and is trying to investigate this thing. Apparently, I'll start by saying the validity of the grand jury is itself being challenged by the Loudoun County School Board and its attorneys. You might recall my mentioning right after Glenn Youngkin's inauguration that he issued several executive orders, or purported executive orders anyway, and that one of them was essentially declaring the Loudoun County School Board guilty of something, and that he was empowering the Attorney General to convene a special grand jury to come up with an explanation of that crime, which was totally, definitely committed by the Loudoun County School Board. And you can now impanel a grand jury to figure out what to call that crime and then arrest those people for committing it. And if that struck you as a little bit absurd, one, conclusory to begin with, like not let's have an investigation and find out whether anything happened, and if so, let the law lead where it may, but rather a gubernatorial declaration of a crime having occurred, and please convene a grand jury to tell us what crime it was, so we can get down to the act of punishing the people that I believe are guilty of this crime. And as you might have guessed, it's being challenged as unconstitutional on several grounds, not just one, that it was a conclusion in search of an investigation, but two, that the Virginia Constitution presents some significant barriers to a state-level directed, top-down investigation of policy making at the school board level, which constitutionally is reserved to the school boards and no one else, to local control. But on top of it all, the idea that you can impanel a special grand jury to say, I don't care what you call it, but there's a crime around here. Go get those people that are guilty of that crime, which I have declared to be, the case. I've declared into existence. Go get them. And not really the way things work. To quote from the end of this article that we were reading before, let's see. Ian Pryor, the executive director of Fight for Schools, let's see. On Monday, of course, says he hasn't filed a petition seeking removal of other members of the school board. They might start all over again and say, well, the court has ruled as to our recall efforts on these two, but they didn't say anything about the rest of them, except they will all be dismissed on the same basis. But he just wants to chew up court time and cost the school board money. He also hasn't decided whether to refile or appeal Monday's cases after the special grand jury completes its investigation. He says, I think the best way to get the facts out is with the special grand jury. But, as I told you, the Loudoun County School Board is seeking to halt that special grand jury investigation. According to a motion filed last week, the special grand jury surfaced in April. Stephen Webster, the attorney representing the school board, said in a motion that the executive order prompting the investigation is itself unlawful, and the Attorney General has no authority to seek impaneling that special grand jury. So we'll see whether Pryor and the angry parents, who formerly referred to as Karens, but we stopped doing that, I think finally, maybe, it's over with. At any rate, we'll see whether they're handed another set of losses once this thing gets inside a courtroom and somebody who is supposedly impartial and actually looking at the facts and the requirements of law will tell them to, go jump in a lake as they've done here. Anyway, the good news is that the first test of these stupid efforts to interfere with our duly elected school board members here is being dismissed, and it was good to see the loss handed to these idiots, and hopefully there's more to come. All right, let's see. Back into pocket for some of the other important stories of the day. Let's see. How about, why not a little bit of reporting from the New York Times and elsewhere? Shall we start with the New York Times that will take the more obtuse view, or start with MSNBC, which will get right to the accusations? What do you think? Maybe we should look at the obtuse view and see whether we level the same accusations as the Maddow folks from MSNBC, both focusing on Jared Kushner's possible criminality. Let's impanel a special grand jury to see whether we think there's a crime chargeable here. The New York Times version of things begins under this headline: Kushner's and Mnuchin's quick pivots to business with the Gulf. We read the other day about Jared Kushner having raised, I think, $2 billion from some of the sovereign wealth funds from the Persian Gulf states for his new hedge fund, and then kind of had a laugh about Mnuchin only raising half that amount, even though he was the more serious of the two in terms of which one would you think might have more success running a hedge fund, Jared Kushner or Stephen Mnuchin? But I guess neither of them really. But on the other hand, he raised only half of what Kushner raised, but, $1 billion is nothing to sneeze at. So what about this? Well, weeks before the Trump administration ended, says our subheader here, Jared Kushner and Steven Mnuchin met with future investors on official trips to the Middle East. So it's not just that they, after leaving office, went back to cash in on their connections and were handed $2 and $1 billion respectively, but that they arranged for it. They used the official time and official resources while they were still supposedly serving our country, which I'm glad they, were distracted for whatever brief amount of time from screwing the country over, but using official resources to head over to the Gulf states and negotiate their private business settlements ahead of time before they actually left office, so they could be sure they made a soft landing, all of that paid for by you and me. Shortly before the 2020 election, Trump administration officials unveiled a U.S. government-sponsored program called the Abraham Fund that they said would raise $3 billion for projects around the Middle East. Oh, that's funny. I wonder if that's what the Maddow conclusion is. If not, it ought to be. I mean, do you notice what's going on here? By the way, the reporting is that of Kate Kelly and David D. Kirkpatrick here for the New York Times. The Abraham Fund I barely remember, and I guess they named it the Abraham Fund because, well, I guess they're trying to show some sort of unity of the three Abrahamic religions, even though only two are represented as among the royalty of the Gulf states. And Kushner is well, actually, am I wrong? Is Mnuchin Jewish? I don't even know. Actually, I think he may be. Let's see. I don't really know for sure, but I wonder if a quick Google search will tell me whether or not that's true. Yeah, Mnuchin's family is Jewish, so just interesting. So Abraham makes sense anyway. But more to the point, really, was that the Abraham Fund was set to raise $3 billion for projects around the Middle East, and this was a negotiation between then Trump administration officials and government officials in the Gulf states running their sovereign wealth funds. How much would we give to this thing? $3 billion. Okay, but keep that figure in mind. But you may already have noticed that $3 billion is the same total that you get if you total up the $2 billion that they gave Jared Kushner privately for his hedge fund and the $1 billion that they gave Steve Mnuchin privately for his hedge fund. And I believe, from skimming the MSNBC version of this article, that the Abraham Fund pretty much never comes to fruition. It's in the last months of the Trump administration. They come to this agreement, and then Trump loses, and then they just, I guess, go. They were probably planning to just say F it anyway. But screw it. We're not going to do the Abraham Fund. These losers are out of office anyway, so there's no point in going ahead with it. Or we were only going to do this thing in order to bolster the Trump administration, and now there's no point in bolstering them. So what are we going to do with the $3 billion? How about if we give it to the same people who came here and negotiated for it before, except we give it to them instead of to worthy causes in the Middle East? I think that's what ended up happening here. Spearheaded by President Donald J. Trump's son-in-law and advisor, Jared Kushner, the Abraham Fund promised to capitalize on diplomatic agreements he had championed between Israel and some Arab states, pacts known as the Abraham Accords. Stephen Mnuchin, then Treasury Secretary, helped inaugurate the fund on a trip to the United Arab Emirates and Israel, hailing the accords as a tremendous foundation for economic growth. What we didn't know was he meant his economic growth. It was little more than talk. With no accounts, no employees, no income or projects, the fund vanished when Mr. Trump left office. And not just like, well, let's fail to organize it and keep the $3 trillion or $3 billion, but the funds vanished too. Here, you can take the $3 billion. Take it with you and have no accountability for it whatsoever. And, it's not our money. That's sovereign wealth fund from the Gulf states. If they want to spend it that way, I guess it's up to them. Anyway, turns out that once again, it was little more than talk when they said they were going to start these funds. Yet, after Mr. Kushner and Mr. Mnuchin crisscrossed the Middle East in the final months of the administration on trips that included trying to raise money for the project, each quickly launched a private fund that in some way picked up where the Abraham Fund had ended. That is to say, I mean, the New York Times, I guess, is too polite at this point or too worried about legalities to say. What they mean is they picked up the $3 billion and left with it. Mr. Kushner and Mr. Mnuchin brought along top aides who had helped court Gulf rulers while promoting the Abraham Fund, and soon both were back in the same royal courts asking for investments, although for purely commercial endeavors. That's the big problem here. Within 3 months, Mr. Mnuchin's new firm had circulated detailed investment plans and received $500 million in commitments from the Emiratis, Kuwaitis, and Qataris, according to previously unreported documents prepared by the main Saudi sovereign wealth fund, which itself soon committed $1 billion. Mr. Kushner's new firm reached an agreement for $2 billion of investment from the Saudis 6 months after he left government. A New York Times report last month revealing the Saudi investment in the Kushner and Mnuchin funds raised alarms from ethics experts and Democratic lawmakers about the appearance of potential payoffs for official acts during the Trump administration. But an examination of the two men's travel toward the end of the Trump presidency raises other questions about whether they sought to exploit official relationships with foreign leaders for private business interests. Of course they did. In the weeks after the election, Kushner made 3 trips to the Middle East. The last for a January 5th, what do you know, summit in Saudi Arabia with leaders of the Gulf monarchies. Mr. Mnuchin that day began a tour through the region that was planned to include private meetings with the heads of sovereign wealth funds of Saudi Arabia, the Emirates, Qatar, and Kuwait, all future investors. He cut it short after the Capitol riot, believe it or not, dropping the Kuwait stop, and in Saudi Arabia, meeting only with the finance minister. Mr. Kushner and his aides have sometimes cast his private firm, Affinity Partners, as something like a continuation of the Abraham Fund. It's not that we stole the money, it's that we're the continuation. Since Biden won't be running the Abraham Fund, we will. On a 4-day trip to Israel in March to meet companies seeking investments, Mr. Kushner's team portrayed the firm as a chance to invest in the peacemaking potential of the Abraham Accords. People who heard the pitch said, speaking on condition of anonymity. Both Mr. Kushner and Mr. Mnuchin hired several aides who were deeply involved in the Accords. A top executive at Affinity, retired Major General Miguel Correa, is a former military attaché in the Emirates who later worked in the White House. Top executives at Mr. Mnuchin's fund, Liberty Strategic Capital, included a former ambassador to Israel and a former Treasury aide who helped arrange meetings with Gulf leaders. The transition from government work for one Liberty Strategic executive was so fast that his jobs appeared to overlap. A roster of 11 top executives and advisors provided to the Saudis by April 2021 included the managing director, Michael D'Ambrosio, even though he was still an assistant director at the Secret Service through the end of May. A Secret Service spokesman said that Mr. D'Ambrosio had disclosed his new employment to the agency and spent his last weeks there on paid leave. A former Treasury aide known as a close confidant had resigned in 2019 and was waiting for Mr. Mnuchin in the private sector. That confidant, Eli Miller, had been working with Persian Gulf sovereign wealth funds at Blackstone, another investment firm, and immediately rejoined the secretary at his new firm's founding. The path from public service to private investing is well trod by members of both parties. The 2 Treasury secretaries under President Barack Obama later went to Wall Street. But Mr. Kushner and Mr. Mnuchin stand out, ethics experts said, for the speed of their pivots and for the sums they raised from foreign rulers they had recently dealt with on behalf of the United States. And I guess really more to the point here, and maybe that's what the Rachel Maddow piece is discussing more directly, it's not just that they very quickly pivoted from government service to private interests, but that they spent government resources, U.S. government resources, arranging for $3 billion in investment from the sovereign wealth funds of the Gulf states in the Abraham funds, meant to be government-administered or quasi-governmental, perhaps, organizations that would invest in, economic development projects in the Middle East. And then the pivot involved both leaving the public sector for the private sector, but also taking the $3 billion that had been negotiated for public or quasi-public projects and saying, forget investing it in public and quasi-public funds. Let's move it instead to the private hedge funds and private equity funds run by these two people who are also making this pivot. So there was a pivot for the people, but also the actual money. It wasn't that they said, well, while you were in government, we committed $3 billion to these public or quasi-public agencies, and now you're in private practice and we'll give you some more and different money to do more things, which would have its own problems attached to it. But worse, they said, let's not even duplicate the money. You could opt to invest $3 billion in the public side in the Abraham funds and $3 billion with the people who started the Abraham funds now that they've left government and have started in the private sector. But no, it's worse than that. That money that we were going to give to the quasi-public purpose is rescinded and handed over to the private purpose headed by these same two guys. It's really quite amazing. The Saudish government, or rather investment with Mr. Kushner, was made despite an advisory panel's objections about his lack of relevant experience, the absence of other big investors, the high fee, and the public relations risk of his ties to the former president, according to the minutes of a Saudi Public Investment Fund meeting last June that were obtained by the Times. I remember reading that. Ethics experts suggested that the payment could be seen as a bid for influence if his father-in-law returned to office. Senator Elizabeth Warren, a Massachusetts Democrat, has urged the Justice Department to take a really hard look at whether Mr. Kushner violated any criminal laws. Kathleen Clark, a law professor at Washington University in St. Louis, who studies government ethics, said each fund raised different issues. For Kushner, she said, the reason this smells so bad is that there's all sorts of evidence that he did not receive this on the merits. But for Mnuchin, who was a successful investor before entering government, the biggest question is whether he was burnishing relationships as Treasury Secretary that he knew would be useful to him in the near future in private. Ms. Clark said, if he was, that's an abuse of his office. I don't know if it's criminal, but it's certainly corrupt. Kushner, of course, declines to comment through a spokesman. In a statement, a spokesman for Mnuchin denied that he had sought investments while in office and said, without providing specifics, that some of the details of the Saudi documents were inaccurate. The former secretary was returning to a decades-long career as a professional investor, and the firm has diverse backers, including U.S. insurance companies, sovereign wealth funds, family offices, and other institutional investors. Maybe, maybe not. But that's how he seeks to distinguish himself from Jared Kushner, who somehow miraculously got twice as much money from the sovereign wealth funds as he did, regardless of it all. So anyway, that's the gist of things over from the New York Times side. Perhaps a quick glance in the moments we have left in our third segment here at the way Steve Bannon at the Maddow blog at MSNBC.com treats this, and perhaps a little more direct and to the point. Why Saudi money for Kushner and Mnuchin is drawing fresh scrutiny. Before leaving office, Kushner and Mnuchin engaged in official Middle Eastern travel to countries they would soon hit up for private cash. That's about how we saw it, but there's even more. In the final months of the Trump administration, the then Treasury Secretary, Stephen Mnuchin, and presidential son-in-law Jared Kushner spent quite a bit of time and money, our money, in the Middle East, ostensibly in support of a program called the Abraham Fund, which would finance projects in the region. On the surface, this wouldn't seem especially notable, but just below the surface, there's a lot more to it. As the New York Times reported in a detailed new piece, the Abraham Fund proved to be little more than a mirage. After Donald Trump left the White House, the fund ceased to be. But wouldn't you know it, after the Abraham Fund evaporated, Mnuchin and Kushner also launched private funds that sought to raise money from many of the same folks, most notably in Saudi Arabia. In fact, the duo didn't just seek the money, they received it. Or I guess I should say didn't just seek the money, they received it. Soon after leaving office, Mnuchin's private venture received $1 billion commitment from the main Saudi sovereign wealth fund, on top of other investments from other Middle Eastern countries. Kushner received a $2 billion investment with the Saudis, even after those responsible for helping oversee the Saudi investment fund concluded that such a commitment was a very bad idea. And remember, that is a public sovereign wealth fund, and presumably they're, responsible to someone somewhere. In the United States, you'd be open to considerable legal liability if you overruled the professional judgment of the advisory teams and went ahead. I mean, you might be able to get away with it under the business decision doctrine. It might be unreachable unless there was some tremendous disaster that ended up actually costing all of the money, and you'd still be able to plead that it was a bad business decision and nothing more. But at any rate, you'd be on the record with this recommendation of the advisory committee and the option to overrule them. While it might be in your hands as the chief executive, it's actually certainly a different story when the person is also the sovereign of the nation, the owner of Saudi Arabia, who can say, let's not have liability for this, and let's not even have it reach the courts that I pay for, and we'll pretend that there's nothing to it. I mean, they adopt, once again, like adopting the form of a regular country as opposed to the extensive compound of the Saud family. They put a flag on the outside, but just like Donald Trump made up his own coat of arms for his golf courses when he thought, golf is a classy game played by rich people and the kind of people who have coats of arms for their families. So we'll make up a coat of arms for the Trump family and put it on it'll be emblazoned on the golf carts so that they look fancy and pedigreed. And that's the way we'll look like. We're fancy enough to take your money. Similarly, I guess, in a way, the Saud family said, this very large estate that we own could pass as a country. I mean, why not? Like if Mar-a-Lago could claim a seat in the United Nations, it probably would. There's no reason to give it to them. But if somebody held that opportunity out to them, sure, he'd take it. All you got to do is get yourself a flag and, appoint some of the people that you now call advisors. You'll call them ministers instead and pretend that you have a whole country here, and then we'll let you into the UN. I mean, there's a very large population on this compound, sizable enough that it outnumbers some other places that we call legitimate countries, so maybe you are one. Anyway, we don't really need to relitigate that, but more to the point here, you have a sovereign wealth fund that has rules, bylaws that says, that you will take into consideration the recommendations of the advisory committee, which you have because it's a public wealth fund, and you don't want it to look like it's all being done by one dictator, except the whole country is kind of being run by one dictator. So what's the difference? But those are the trappings you put on it, so that people think you're a real sovereign wealth fund. And when you get investments from them, you can say, I got it from the sovereign wealth fund, and that's not easy to do. You have to convince them that you're a sound business operation in order for them to agree to invest in you. That's the idea of those. Well, the idea is to protect the public value in the sovereign wealth fund, I guess, from the Saudish side. And it also lends itself to creating value for the people who get the investments. We're being trusted by people whose job it is to check whether or not we're trustworthy. But when it's all run by a dictator, that doesn't matter very much. And of course, when it's all being run by a dictator in Saudi Arabia, like, what does a member of the public in Saudi Arabia stand up and say, I think that the proper procedure wasn't followed here, and I'm suing on behalf of the citizens of Saudi Arabia to get that money back? And then they say, well, I'm chopping your head off. And that's the end of the case, and that can happen in a dictatorship. And, well, a dictatorship where they keep a sword on hand for beheadings, it can happen that much faster. Anyway, interesting story.
Sup, fam? It's your boy Darwin, aka Darwin_Darko, aka the most reasonable man in America, aka KITM's senior black correspondent. You might remember me from such recordings as Spacemen vs. Space Cadets and We Need to Talk About Joe Biden. Today, I want to bring you good news about that thing you've been struggling with. Do you suffer from giving too much of a damn? Do you turn on the series of tubes and find yourself outraged at the particular way some news organization strung some sentences together only to realize, nope, this is not some fictional hellscape? Well, guess what? You no longer have to accept the life of giving too much of a damn. You can do something about it, because even you, yes you, can be a show contributor. Now I know what you're thinking. Hey, Mr. Most Reasonable Man in America, I'm not some professional podcast talking guy. Don't worry about it. Do you have a smartphone or some other electronic recording device? Well, that's all you need. You too can have a segment where you can read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Fair warning though, side effects may include general punditry, having opinions and hot takes, getting stuff off your chest, and hearing your own voice. If your recording lasts longer than 5 to 7 minutes, please consult kagrox@gmail.com. That's KAGROX@gmail.com.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Joan McCarter is with us. You sound further away from KITM headquarters than usual.
By about 430 miles.
Ah,
yes.
Okay, you measured it. Good.
And another time zone.
Yeah, all right. Oh, that's true, right? Oh, so even earlier for you.
Yes,
than it used to
I'm
be.
trying to keep my Idaho schedule.
Oh, okay.
So that means starting work at 6, which is a little weird. But
Yeah, I guess that's true. No, but you be on the same time zone as Daily Coast World Headquarters. Do they notice that?
Well, no, because it's already 9
yeah,
there.
right. What do they care? Okay, well,
But we're a rather West Coast heavy crew,
Yes.
so it's yeah.
so yeah, I mean, you might be able to get an extra hour of sleep in before they notice. I mean, you're not starting any earlier, nor any later. So it's not like you moved to Hawaii, which is a thought.
Oh, it's a very tempting thought.
I'll bet. Okay. Well, all settled. That's, I say that because you're on the phone. So I don't know what's going on there.
We're in a rather small rental.
Okay.
While my house sells,
Oh.
and yeah,
And then you can
not necessarily
shop for a
settled,
larger-
but
okay.
here.
All right.
landed
Well,
with a
that's good. What happened to the piano?
I gave it away.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it's a difficult thing to get rid of pianos these days. It's not a robust piano buying market, I don't think.
I
Unless you have
gave
a
away
classic.
so much stuff.
Yeah.
It felt good,
Yeah. Be rid of it.
but a little frantic because, it's like, there isn't any
Yeah.
room to pack this and I just don't want to deal with it. Here, take
Right.
it.
Yeah. Well, hopefully it went to a good piano home where someone will practice on it.
Well,
I don't know.
the person who got it
Yeah.
came in and played it and
All
just
right.
rhapsodized over it. Loved
Ah,
it.
perfect.
Hopefully he's gotten it out of the house now. His
Oh, you
wife
just
works
left.
with the
Bye.
realtor, so
Oh, okay.
she's gonna make sure it gets out of the house, I think.
Okay. Yeah, that's an unusual way of handling it. Well, I'm leaving. You come and get this thing out of the house. I don't care if you have to knock down a wall anymore. You can go ahead and do it. I'm out of here. All right. Well, that's neither here nor there, but everyone was, I don't know, maybe interested in following up on it.
It was, it's hard. I lived with this piano my entire life. It's a beautiful instrument. I don't play it anymore, but it's so much attachment to it just sentimentally and because it really is a beautiful thing. And it's so weird when beautiful things don't
Right.
get appreciation.
And it's, even when it's been in the family for a while, or and then people when it comes time to part with it. Well, maybe I'll start playing again. I don't know. And if I do, who wants to start over with a new piano when I had one? But but then you get realistic about it. I'm really probably not going to.
No.
Still, all right.
If I'm going to take up an instrument, it's going to be the guitar my late brother-in-law left for me. So
there you go. All right. Well, at least you have another family instrument with you. That's nice. Okay. Well, I was telling everybody in the Morning Post, all right, well, it's been 3 weeks since we were able to talk. So theoretically, there ought to be a huge amount of things to catch up on. But the thing is, you cover Congress. And that's not really necessarily the same thing.
They got the Ukraine money through.
Yes, okay, that's true.
Giving Rand Paul absolutely nothing.
Okay.
He held out for 10 days, 2 weeks, demanding stuff. He got absolutely nothing, and it passed anyway. And so,
all right. Not
thanks,
even a
Rand
set of
Paul.
curlers.
Why do you exist?
No one really knows, and he likes to try to hijack things. But that's one of those things where you learn, if you really are all alone on this, eventually they will just steamroller you. The filibuster is of no use to you if there's 90 senators willing to move on. So.
There were, however, 10 others who voted against it along with him. So
yeah. 10.
They weren't going to filibuster. They weren't going to stop it, but they weren't going to support it, which is very strange. Very strange.
It seems kind of odd, but all right. So they're on record as having...
I guess they're counting on Putin in 2024.
Maybe.
Or whenever their next election is for them.
Yeah. Do you know who was among the 10 or maybe a name or two that stood out?
Blackburn, Crapo, Idaho.
Okay.
Who is up this year, but it doesn't matter because,
Right.
Tuberville.
So they may really just be...
I think Rick Scott.
Huh. Well, it's an unusual stance to take in a weird assortment of people, but they're weirdos. I don't know. They're Republican senators, and some of them you do wonder what the political dynamic is and whether maybe they really are counting on getting, I don't know, oligarch support or something. But not many of them made known what their objections were very clearly, or in ways that rose to national prominence anyway. I'm sure they had some statement to make, but I don't know.
Their whole thing, Rand Paul's whole thing, and the thing I guess that they were hanging it on was, is just, how do we know this isn't just some kind of big slush fund? How do we know that it's here's Ukraine actually being attacked by Russia at war?
Right. Yeah, how do we know you're going to use this for weapons?
Right.
We need
an inspector general in there to make sure that the money's spent the way it's supposed to be. I think that they're going to be spending the money the way it's supposed to be spent.
Yeah, in all likelihood.
So.
Here's money that's supposed to, not literally, but, we'll transfer it into materials that are supposed to blow up and catch on fire. And, this is finally, the money is actually being used the way everyone suspects it's being used. Blown up and lit on fire.
Right, exactly.
And we need an inspector general to make sure it blew up and was lit on fire. We're as many people have pointed out, there's nothing we're better at. This is the expertise of the United States of America is, finding huge amounts of money for weapons to blow up and light on fire around the world. We're excellent at it.
And kept our economy afloat since the war.
Yeah.
So, there you go.
So, and we are particularly good at it. And this is a great opportunity to point. I mean, it's a legit thing. This is our top skill, and forever, in all of our lifetimes, and at least for most everybody, the majority of their lifetimes, the worry was that the Russians might be just as good at it, and it turns out that they really never have been. Except for the ultimate blow up everything. Although who knows? Maybe all the hoses on those rockets leak.
This is a thing that really is very scary to me. Looking at the general situation of the Russian military and You know, the old stuff that they're dealing with and their lack of cohesion and their confusion and just how many systems aren't working.
Yeah.
What kind of shape is their nuclear arsenal in?
Yeah, we don't know.
And is it going to deteriorate to the point where it just all blows up? I mean, this is not something that I want to think about, but...
No, you don't want to spend your time on it. I mean, I just don't know the nature of the weapons, whether that's something... I mean, I don't think that's the kind of thing that can happen. And I guess if you were trying to go... I'd worry... I guess the materials could be unstable, but I don't think it can detonate from becoming unstable. But who knows? I mean, I guess if the triggering explosives become unstable,
what if there's a wiring glitch and it launches?
I guess, although that
unexpectedly or accidentally, or
at that point, I expect it to fly around like a balloon, and who knows where it lands. But I don't know. I mean,
well, anyway, on that happy
thought. I mean, could be me, could be Belarus. I don't know. We'll find out. I mean, I guess it might people who know better would be able to say that whether it technically endangers themselves more than us if the rocket boosters don't work. But anyway, you could have an ecological disaster certainly if the instability of triggering explosives cause a problem and these things blow up in their silos. Well, that's bad too. Not as bad for Topeka.
Would Russia notice another ecological disaster?
Maybe not. But anyway, it does cause a lot of problems and a lot of worries, and you don't know how Russians would react to it, and sometimes the reaction may be, we have a limited shelf life for some of these weapons. Maybe we better use them before they, expire or something, or who knows?
Right now, it's really kind of hard to know how Putin's thinking.
Yeah.
And who's going to be there to stop him if he is thinking the worst. So
odd and scary.
Not anything nobody else has been thinking about.
True, right. And there are experts to whom we can refer, but it is a frightening situation. Meanwhile, we do what we do best and say, well, if the whole thing goes south, we would like it to have a pile of our money to take with it. All right, good.
That's how it works. It keeps Northrop Grumman or whoever they are happy.
Yeah, right. So people are in business. Other news around the world, plenty of it. I don't think we're
plenty of it. Not a lot in Congress. The House is out.
Yeah,
till June 7th. They're doing committee work.
Yes, and getting ready for the big committee to do its committee work in June.
They did get some stuff passed, which of course is going to die in the Senate. Never mind that Republicans say they want to fight inflation and that gas prices are too high and everything's awful and baby formula.
Mm-hmm.
Anything that Democrats have put forward to fix that, they're not going to go along with. So, starve babies.
So usual MO there.
In contrast to all that defense money, the $40 billion that they're burning through on a 6-week basis, the House wanted just $28 million.
Million with an N.
I mean, $28 million is
I'd love it.
A good chunk of change, but it's kind of pocket change compared to a lot of stuff that the government deals with.
Yes.
To beef up FDA inspections and ability to respond to this crisis.
Okay.
It started because there was tainted formula, there was contaminated formula in the Abbott lab.
Yes, you're supposed to stop that.
You're supposed to stop that, and they want the FDA to be able to do that more efficiently and perhaps in a timely manner that would mean in the future. We didn't have a nationwide crisis on our hands. Nope.
Can't do that.
Nope, can't do that. All of the Republicans in the House voted against that, and 5 Democrats went along with them. But it passed anyway. However, it's not going to make it to the Senate floor. I can't imagine it makes it to the Senate floor.
Unlikely. The usual MO, of course, right? The Republicans will find something to complain that the Democrats haven't done right. Democrats will then, maybe that's a dumb idea to start with, to say, well, we should fix that thing. And then they pass a bill in the House where they have a working majority, even though narrow, to fix that thing. And then Republicans realize, if Democrats can fix that thing, people will hear in the news that Democrats get things done. So we need to block it from happening.
And it's much better if we can say, Democrats are in control while babies are starving and gas prices are too high.
Right.
That's the other thing that the House did.
The gas.
That the Senate will not do.
Okay. What were we doing about gas? I forgot.
Their bill would allow investigations by the Federal Trade Commission into price gouging.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah. Well,
which,
no one's for that,
it's not
right?
the windfall profits tax a lot of us have been asking for, but it is some real teeth and some potential deterrent to price gouging.
Okay. And that supposedly bothers everyone, but apparently not. Not enough to actually do anything about it.
No.
Democrats say, let's stop it. Republicans say,
not
let's...
when they can bitch about gas prices and say it's Joe Biden's fault.
Right. They love doing that more than anything. And even if it wasn't, I mean, honestly, how many of them blamed 9/11 on Obama? So what's the difference? But for the most part, that will now work because people will say, oh, no, definitely Joe Biden is currently the president. And gas prices are high, so it must be his doing.
Yes.
Which, and of course, if it was Trump, they would say, well, the president can't control gas prices.
No, this is Russia. This is the war. It's not our fault.
Yeah. All right. Well, so not much that they can do about it, but they've made their attempt. House comes back in June.
Right. The Senate's working through this week, probably not accomplishing a lot, maybe some nominations, but then again, maybe not, because now Chris Van Hollen is recovering from a stroke. Yes. This stroke thing is a little weird. But also Jeff Merkley has COVID.
Yeah.
So
I just saw that yesterday, and I'm beginning to wonder, and I guess a lot of people are, I guess they're possibly related. A lot of strokes all of a sudden, but then a lot of COVID causing a lot of circulatory problems for people in the long term, and it doesn't take
that
much to connect
seems
them.
to be the likeliest correlation here.
Yeah, maybe. So, all right. Well, still dangerous. Wear your masks where possible. And what's masking like in your new area? People,
much better.
That's good. That's everybody has kind of abandoned it, but it is making a slow comeback.
I mean, nobody. I was in the extreme minority in Idaho.
Yeah.
My little neighborhood was pretty good. The local co-op that I shopped at was very good. Outside of that, I was definitely an outlier wearing a mask. But here, even with the mandate lifted, lots of stores are still requiring it, and lots of people are just doing it because...
Okay. Well, that's nice.
Because it's Oregon, and they're good people here.
Yeah. I mean, I'm still doing it.
there are bad people here, too. Just,
Sure. But
not the Idaho kind of people.
Okay. Well, a different kind of bad people. A better quality of bad people. That's nice.
Yes.
I still find myself doing it too, just because, I don't know, I don't want to get anything. And there's still an excuse to do it. People look at me funny, but then I go home. So what do I care?
I have an entire family of immunocompromised people. So
yeah, I don't, and I still think,
I'm not going to do
I
it to them.
Sick?
So
okay, well, wise, and I'm glad it's more comfortable there too, and that there's still pockets of people who don't. Remember when everybody had the freedom to do whatever they wanted, and or that was the argument, and then you decided with that freedom I'd like to put a mask on, and then it had to morph into you don't have the right to put that on.
Yeah,
that was pretty quick. Oh well. Well, let's see. What other things interest you that are on the horizon? Are you going to be assigned to watch the primetime hearings for the January 6th committee? Do you draw that luck?
I doubt it. I would. I mean, they'll be on in the background, most definitely. But I'm not going to have that assignment. I don't think. Although I've got the most experience live blogging, so we'll see.
Yeah, so it may fall to you anyway. But then again, how are these other folks supposed to get their experience live blogging if you don't?
True, and I am
your
not
argument.
the one who's been following this most closely.
Okay.
I think probably Brandy's going to be covering that one for us really
All
well.
right. Well, we'll keep an eye on it that way then.
Yes.
And
the next few weeks, there's not going to be a whole lot going on besides the lead up to that, because again, Congress is out. There are things that they need to be figuring out, like Build Back Better, and whatever is going to be left of that, and what should be included in that is averting the big October surprise that Democrats or Joe Manchin is putting on us of
now what?
extremely hiked Obamacare premiums for all of the people who's been getting great subsidies thanks to the American Rescue Plan.
Are they running out? Are we sunsetting?
Yeah, they're
things?
expiring because, of course, Democrats, and Joe Manchin wasn't saying otherwise, assumed when they put them in the American Rescue Plan and had them sunsetting in 2022, by then they would have done the second reconciliation bill to extend them 3 years or longer.
All right. Well, that's another. Our specialty is building cliffs and then walking off of them.
Yes, indeed.
Well, it will make it
Here's
a cliff
another
because
cliff,
no
and
one
the
will
bad
ever...
part of it is, of course, is that these notices of hiked premiums go out in October.
Oh, good timing. Great job. Excellent.
Yeah.
idea.
Yeah. It's just Democrats bringing this on themselves. We've been talking about it for a couple months now and not seeing a whole lot of movement about it. Business Insider, and I'm going to be writing on this yesterday, did just a little bit of projecting, working with Brain Wrap from Daily Coast, Charles Gaba,
All right.
to look at the time bomb that could be going off by then.
Great.
And they estimated premium hikes for a 60-year-old couple with $75K in income. In West Virginia, that would be $2,700 for the year.
Well,
that's quite a bit of money.
We'll have to find somebody who cares about West Virginia and tell them.
Yes. So, Manchin on and on and on about inflation.
Yeah.
Here
Here's
you
one.
go, dude.
Right. Let's not inflate the premiums. Or, let's do exactly that. Well, it's kind of discouraging to see it in the offing. I hope that, I hate to have to save everything at the last minute. I mean, I guess it could come out much better. Like the news in October could be Democrats save everybody from huge premium hikes. We could see that happen.
It would be nice if that was the news by July, because this summer is when insurance companies have to figure that out.
Oh, okay.
Have to set those rates.
I see. All right, well.
They kind of need to know sooner rather than later.
All right. Well, that's probably true, although it would be a helpful October headline, but of course we would
design it. It would be a very helpful October headline.
Design it so that if it goes well, it'll happen when no one pays attention.
The headlines will come out.
Yeah.
Great affordable health care through Obamacare. Again, still. Right. Thanks, Democrats.
It could happen.
If they can do it.
Right.
It means, of course, they have to do it through reconciliation. They still have the reconciliation bill available to them.
Okay.
That they set up for Build Back Better, because Republicans are not going to let them do this, and Manchin and Sinema are not going to let Democrats get rid of the filibuster so that they can do this. So it has to happen in whatever reconciliation bill Joe Manchin is going to allow.
All right. Well, he better get cracking and write one then.
Yes,
it'd be nice
he
if
had. He's not very good at that writing it part.
Well, the part he's used to is saying no to other people's writing.
Right.
So.
And, then again, there's the cinema part of it that who knows what she'll support or not support.
Yeah, no one knows.
Because she won't tell them.
Find out. But again, another well-designed program. If it works out, you'll get headlines in the summer when no one's reading. And if it doesn't work out, we'll find that out in October when it's time to vote. Awesome.
Yeah.
You should reverse those things. That's just note to somebody about that.
You know,
All
it
right.
just wouldn't be a September without all sorts of cliffs ready to fall
Yeah.
at the end of it.
That's what the fiscal year will do to you. But boy, they really well. Okay, once again, but I think they frequently make the decision to do that on purpose because that pressure ratchets things up and turns reluctant votes into yes votes, even when it's Manchin. But who knows what you have to give up to get there? But
That's the theory.
yeah, we'll see whether any
That's
of it
why
actually
continuing
works.
resolutions always end,
Yeah.
it's 4 days before Christmas or whatever.
Right, to get people to set up artificial cliffs. So, goodness. Well, we'll keep an eye on that one.
By the way,
yes.
I'm just going to hedge my bets now and say we're going to be dealing with continuing resolutions
Oh.
from September onward.
Yeah, well, that's always a good
Well,
bet.
October 1st onward.
You're probably right. It's certainly been the history. So, safe bet. I'll give you even odds on that. I can't do better than that for you. But it's probably true.
Probably true.
Huh.
We've also got the Supreme Court,
Yes,
of course,
that's the
ready
next thing I
to
wanted to ask you
to
about.
rule on June medical, and it's not going to be good.
Mm-hmm.
I think we can safely trust that Alito's draft is going to be pretty much the final draft.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to change much. And that might have been the idea of leaking it allegedly. One theory of the case on that. But the court's been in the news a lot lately, and smaller scale badness, I think, but some very weird decisions that I guess harken, more weird and inexplicable cases being handed down, and maybe just shying away from the explaining of anything at all, just doing what they want to do.
Pretty much yesterday's
we don't make sense.
criminal defense
Yeah.
decision, which says, what Sixth Amendment? You don't think they really meant that, did you, when they talked about having competent counsel? Nah.
Yeah.
So
I
yesterday, the majority, including John Roberts, bloodthirsty ghoul that he is, decided that it would be okay if innocent people ended up being killed by the state
But they're
in
they're
capital
into
cases. So,
that. Okay. Thanks, I guess.
yeah, and
John.
again, this is another case in which there was very clear precedent of the Supreme Court saying, and they did it, just a decade ago, saying if the state so screws up a prosecution that there is reasonable doubt to assume this person is guilty, then yes, they should have a federal remedy. They should be able to take it to a federal judge to have it evaluated. That was precedent set just, again, a decade ago with John Roberts on the court, and that was reversed.
I thought about it a second time and decided not to do it. But yeah, there were all sorts of weird repercussions from this, and I haven't really followed that story all that closely, but pointing out, I guess, if you have ineffective counsel at trial, your rights in pointing that out and introducing evidence that you did in fact have incompetent counsel has been severely curtailed.
Yes.
I'm not sure how that happens.
So these two cases, they were really poorly argued in the criminal phase of it.
Bad news.
And then in the sentencing phase of it and in the appeal phase of it, just as badly
Ugh.
argued. So the remedy that these two defendants were looking for was a federal judge evaluating what was missing from their defenses. Mm-hmm. In one case, a whole timeline was phenomenally off. The timeline that basically proved the injury that killed the child that the guy was sentenced to death for could not have happened in the window that the prosecutor said it had.
And yet,
he's innocent, he's on death row, and he's going to be executed by the state of Arizona.
Yeah,
there were a lot of other problems with his prosecution.
I guess so.
And the other defendant, the second case that was up, is severely mentally disabled and psychologically disabled. And that wasn't brought up in his defense. He's apparently impaired enough that federal law would preclude his execution. He would not be eligible for the death penalty because of his impairments.
We seem to have a real problem with that in this country, too. And that's been the trend in the Supreme Court for a while now, to overlook that sort of thing.
And 6 of them are overlooking it, including, like I said, John Roberts, that balls and strikes moderate.
Oh, yeah. Well, he's just being non-political and calling it like he sees it, except when he is not looking at all, I guess. I don't know. But, a very disheartening series of rulings, and I think we're seeing the trend towards less and less interest in logical consistency or even explaining anything at all from several members of the court, and really just sort of predetermined outcome. And
very much so. This is the way it is.
Yeah.
Live with it.
The words we have to say to make you think we thought about it are herein included. Thank you.
And guess who's going to be president after 2024? Because we'll decide it.
Well, then at least we know what the outcome of the vote is. It comes out about 60-30. Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Jonah. Good to have you back. Glad you're settled, and we'll look forward to having Congress return, and you're having an eye on it in the next week. Talk to you again.
All right. Thanks,
Take care.
From networksradio.com. You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
Yeah, and it's never enough time with Joan McCarter. It's hard to get her to, now she's waking up an hour earlier to join us, so we're thankful that she's continuing to do that. Glad to have the time that we do. Good to have her back. Of course, next up, Justice Putnam, who gets up even earlier to bring you the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy coming up.